At 2 a.m., while the hospital slept, Dr. Sarah Chen was quietly changing the future of cancer treatment. Nobody at Metropolitan General knew that. To them, she was just Nurse Chen, the quiet Asian woman who drew blood, changed 4 bags, and occasionally asked questions above her pay grade. Nobody bothered to check her full credentials. Nobody thought to ask why a nurse spent her nights running cell cultures instead of watching Netflix. And because nobody asked, nobody knew what was coming. That was exactly how she planned it. For 3 years, Sarah had been living a double life. By day, she took vitals and absorbed every whispered complaint from chemotherapy patients, the nausea, the hair loss, the devastating fatigue that made people wonder if the cure was worse than the disease. By night, in that flickering fluorescent lab, she was engineering the solution. A targeted drug delivery system so precise it could hunt cancer cells like a guided missile while leaving every healthy cell untouched. 94% reduction in side effects. 76% improvement in treatment efficiency. Already patented. Already submitted to the FDA. The entire medical world was about to find out, and most of Metropolitan General was going to wish they'd paid closer attention. Her cover nearly broke the night Dr. Marcus Anderson, head of oncology, wandered into the lab around 2 a.m., hoping, as he often did, to stumble onto someone else's promising idea. "Still here, Nurse Chen," he said, the condescension so habitual he probably didn't notice it anymore. She had already swapped her real samples for routine blood work. "Just finishing up, doctor." He flipped through her research notebook with the casual carelessness of a man who'd never once considered that the person across from him might be smarter than him. "Your documentation is surprisingly thorough for a nurse," he said. "Almost like you have formal research training." "Almost." She smiled neutrally and took back her notebook. What he'd seen was the decoy, good enough to be interesting, incomplete enough to be useless. Her real research lived on an encrypted private server. The kind of encryption, she'd noted privately, that would impress the NSA. "Don't get too ambitious," he said at the door. "The research presentation is tomorrow. Try not to embarrass yourself like last time." Last time. When she'd correctly identified a flaw in his clinical trial data during a staff meeting and the room had laughed, not at the error, but at the nerve of a nurse challenging a doctor. She'd been right. It hadn't mattered. She turned back to her cell cultures. It would matter tomorrow. The research department meeting was standing room only. Department heads. Senior researchers. Administrators. Dr. Anderson stood at the front, clicking through slides, her slides, the preliminary decoy work she'd left just accessible enough for him to find. "Our most significant development," he announced, "is a novel approach to targeted drug delivery in chemotherapy treatment." He glanced toward the back of the room, where Sarah sat in her nursing scrubs after a night shift. Though the initial concept came from unusual sources, our research team has developed it into a promising protocol. Several doctors chuckled. One leaned to whisper something to another. The joke, clearly, was her. Anderson gestured magnanimously. Nurse Chen had some basic ideas. Of course, it took real scientific expertise to develop them properly. He looked directly at her. "Would you like to try explaining the methodology, Nurse Chen?" She stood up. "Actually, Dr. Anderson," she said calmly, "you're presenting outdated data. The research has progressed significantly beyond those preliminary results." The room stirred. His face darkened. "I don't think you're qualified to make that assessment. The FDA seems to disagree." Then every phone in the room buzzed simultaneously. The breaking news alerts hit like a wave. Sarah watched the color drain from Anderson's face as he read his screen, then read it again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. She helped him find his voice. "The FDA has just granted emergency fast-track approval to a revolutionary targeted drug delivery system for chemotherapy. It eliminates 94% of standard treatment side effects while improving efficacy by 76%. The room erupted. She pulled up the patent documentation on the main screen. Every credential. Every publication. Every year of work they'd dismissed. Dr. Sarah Chen, PhD, lead researcher. MIT. NIH. 7 years of published research. 3 prior patents in biomedical engineering. Sole patent holder, advanced chemotherapy delivery protocol. But, you're a nurse, Anderson whispered. Yes, she agreed. I chose to become one. After my doctorate. Because laboratory research alone couldn't tell me what chemotherapy patients actually go through. Every person I cared for as a nurse shaped this research. You just never thought to ask. The licensing rights, she added quietly, were estimated at over $100 million. That got everyone's attention. The board's decision was swift. Anderson was suspended pending an ethics investigation. It turned out his habit of absorbing other people's work was an open secret. Sarah was offered the directorship of a newly created integrated medical research center, combining science with frontline patient care. Anderson resigned rather than face the inquiry. He struggled to find another position. Hospitals, it turned out, were reluctant to hire someone who'd tried to steal a 9-figure patent. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the oncology ward watching their first patient receive the new treatment. Mrs. Rodriguez, 64, looked up in quiet disbelief hours after the infusion. No nausea? No hair loss? The medication only targets the cancer cells, Sarah said, checking her vitals. Everything else is protected. Mrs. Rodriguez stared at her. A nurse developed this? A nurse with a PhD in biomedical engineering, Sarah said gently. But yes. A nurse. That evening, she visited her mother, the woman whose brutal chemotherapy battle had started all of this. Her mom held the framed patent certificate and was quiet for a long moment. When you left NIH to become a nurse, she finally said, I thought you were wasting everything. Sarah took her hand. I needed to see both sides. The science and the suffering. You can't solve a problem you haven't really looked at. Her phone buzzed. The New England Journal of Medicine. Another speaking request. Another pharmaceutical licensing call. She set the phone face down. The only number that mattered today was the one on Mrs. Rodriguez's chart: cancer cells declining, healthy tissue untouched, a woman who would keep her hair and go home to her grandchildren. That was the breakthrough. Everything else was just